Welcome back, everybody, to J Movie Talk. This is episode 341, as I'll be talking about the movie White Men Can't Jump. And I want to thank everyone who has been checking out these sports movie month episodes, where I kicked off the month with Draft Day, starring Kevin Costner, Chadwick Boseman, Dennis Leary, Jennifer Garner. And then the last episode where I was joined by Moneymaker Chris and Chrissy as we talked about another Kevin Costner sports movie, Bull Durham. So here for this episode, diving into talking about White Men Can't Jump from 1992, starring Woody Harrelson, Wesley Snipes, in this basketball, street basketball movie to be exact. This is a movie that I have watched and enjoyed since I was a kid. I didn't see this movie at the movie theater. I think I didn't see this movie until it started coming on television. So maybe 93, maybe 94. No, I want to say 93. Probably around 93. And I've always just enjoyed this movie mainly because this movie doesn't really work if the chemistry between Sydney and Billy, isn't good. And the fact that Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson just work extremely well together. This was their second movie together. They have done 3 movies in total. This was their second and last sports movie because for anyone who remembers, they had parts in the 1986 movie Wildcats with Goldie Hawn as the head coach of the high school football team that they were on. And that movie is kind of insane also, in a fun way. But here, you get both of them, shining and everything like that. And it's kind of funny how, this movie comes a year after New Jack City. And this is maybe, I think, a year before Cheers actually went off the air, or it was the same year. I can't remember, and I'm not looking it up actually. So don't hold me to that exactly, but exactly with the time frame of when Cheers ended. But they were, they pretty much were building their resumes and making their names, in movies and everything around this time. And I thought it was kind of interesting that Ron Shelton, who ironically also directed Bull Durham, that he decided to make not just a basketball movie, but a basketball movie that was not about organized basketball, but it was more about street hustlers or street ball players, which you rarely get. I think the only other movie that I can really think about where it's more like street ball, but there is organized ball in it as well. And I'm talking about Above the Rim, where, you have Dwayne Martin, who he's a star on his high school basketball team, but also too, he's playing in the city, street ball league as well. But as far as just a pure street ball movie, I can't really think of any other movie beside this one that focuses more on the street ball level, of the sport like that. And I thought it was an interesting and bold choice to go that route. And I'm kind of curious. I'm almost kind of curious to know why they never made another, or even kind of went down that road of, let's kind of, go into that lane of producing more street ball movies, especially around the time when and one was like a big, huge thing. So as I'm saying this, it actually came to mind. I'm pretty sure some people who were listening actually probably was saying, well, the movie Streetball and everything with Anthony Mackie, good old Captain America himself, and one of the biggest known street ball players in the world. Hot Sauce is also in that movie and everything. But that is probably the only movie. So I would say White Men Can't Jump and Streetball are probably the 2 movies that I can think of that focus on just strictly the street ball culture of basketball. But you don't really get a lot of those type of movies made, and everything. Which, like I say, still in 1992, I thought that was a bold choice, because at that time you were getting movies that were about, organized sports. It wasn't so much about, what these dudes doing out here on the street courts and everything. But I give Ron Shelton credit, because just like we talked about in the Bull Durham episode about the fact that instead of them going with, the major league team, they decided to keep it in minor league. So I have to give Ron Shelton credit for, kind of thinking outside the box, or, and moving a little different than what the norm was, for, sports movies and like that, and everything. But, one thing that this movie does a really good job of is of how it blends not only the basketball stuff, because the basketball stuff is great, and actually is like the characters are pretty much like riffing, because it's hard to like truly choreograph playing basketball, to make it look like it's not choreographed. So a lot of the stuff that we see in the movie is kind of them just playing ball, but within the context of the character and the context of the script and everything. But how it blends the comedy, the drama, stuff that's going on outside of basketball, because Billy has this whole thing of where him and his girl are being literally hunted by these goons. And then, Sydney, he just like, I do this as a hustle, but I got a business that I'm trying to run and everything like that. And they both have a family dynamic where it's interesting that it's just Billy and Gloria, played by Rosie Perez, which I'm going to talk about her a little later, on that side. But then with Sydney, he has his wife, played by Tara Farrell, and everything, who is a great actress. And I feel like her career probably should have been a lot bigger than what it was. And it's interesting that Angela Bassett and Lynn Whitfield never did a movie together playing sisters or whatever, because I definitely could have seen that, and everything. But she was, she's one of those 90s movie moms, because Boys in the Hood, right? Which, again, a year before this movie came out, she was in that as, Doughboy and Ricky's mother, and everything. But that whole thing with Sydney, where he has a wife, he has a little kid, baby actually, and he's trying to make a way for his family. So I do like how they kind of blended all of that together. And then also too, one thing that they kind of do is give us a look at what it was like, on the streets, on the street courts, and also on the beach, in LA, and just how the pickup game, culture pretty much was at that time. You got all these people around, and if you look at like old clips and stuff like that showing like street ball, games, in certain parks and everything out there, that's basically what it was. And so it was kind of real to, true, like what was going on in real life at the time like that, which adds a little bit more to what makes this movie, as good as it is. And the fact that it, in a way, influenced, not just pop culture, but also sports culture, because you had a bunch of people wanting to trash talk and stuff like that. And you can't tell me that Sidney Dean in some way wouldn't remind you of probably like a Gary Payton, who just talking trash the entire game and just talking this, that, and the third. Or how Billy, in a way, is like Larry Bird to a degree, where they think that he's like this goofy white dude that, he can't play ball until he started playing. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, I had him pegged all wrong and everything. So you can kind of see like a little bit of the crossover between movies and like real life pop culture just by looking at certain characters throughout the movie, and everything. So talking about the cast for a second, I mentioned, of course, Woody Harrelson as Billy Hoyle, Wesley Snipes as Sidney Dean. But then we also have one Miss Rosie Perez as Gloria, who, in my opinion, is the MVP of this movie, because one thing about it, even though her and Billy were together, she didn't take no nonsense from Billy. And she pretty much told him what she was going to do if he didn't stop his nonsense. And he continued with his nonsense, and she kept her word, and she skates off, leaving him standing there with Sydney. And I thought that was kind of an interesting choice to make, as far as, the end of the movie where he doesn't, he loses his money to Sydney basically. And then the fact that he can't give up the hustle life, he loses his girl too. So it's a very bittersweet ending for him in a way. But I mean, he has a new best friend in Sydney Dean, right? But he loses pretty much everything else, which I'm always trying to figure out, like, what exactly are we supposed to get from that? And everything. But one thing, like I say, this movie doesn't work without the chemistry of the two leads, but it also doesn't work without Rosie Perez, who just adds a little bit more extra to it. And then the fact that you have this whole subplot about her wanting to be on Jeopardy, and the fact that she actually ends up going on Jeopardy and doing damn well on that show. And I thought that was a nice touch, and just, kind of grounding the movie in reality in a way, because Jeopardy, was like one of the biggest shows on television at the time. So to kind of incorporate that into it, I thought was very interesting. Now, doing some research, like behind the scenes stuff about this movie, looking at potential like casting choices for who would be in the movie and everything, they pretty much had guys coming in, and the requirement was it didn't matter who they were as far as name recognition or whatever, but if they did not look convincing playing ball, they were not going to be cast, because a lot of the movie hinges on, how well these dudes look playing basketball, and the fact that Woody Harrelson actually did play real ball in school and everything. And the fact that Wesley Snipes is a natural athlete, even though he was not the greatest shooter of it, everything, which he even jokes about when talking about the movie, that he could dribble, he could do this, he could move and everything. But when it came to taking a shot, it was pretty much brick city for him. But the thing was, though, is that he had the charisma, the bravado, and everything that made the character of Sydney just that much larger than life. Because one thing about Wesley Snipes in the movie, especially back in the early 90s, pretty much all throughout the 90s, he had that charisma, and he had the juice basically, and everything. And that's what kind of makes the Sydney character works. And I mean, anybody who plays sports or whatever, whether it's organized ball or street ball or whatever, we all know somebody like a Sydney Dean who talks from the time they get on the court until the time they leave, and just keeps talking, whether they good or not too. I think the ones who talk trash the most that are not good players are worse than the ones that are actually good players that talk trash, because it's like you just talking for the sake of talking, which ironically is basically what the Kadeem Hardison character is, because you only see him playing in that first pickup game, but after that you really don't see him playing that much. And I do think it's kind of interesting, which kind of gets lost when this movie is talked about, is the fact that you had two stars from two of the biggest TV shows at that particular point in time in the same movie. You had Kadeem Hardison, who was on A Different World, and you had Woody Harrelson that was on Cheers. And the fact that those shows came on back to back on NBC, I think just added a little bit more extra to, you had people who were probably Cheers fans going to see it for Woody. You probably had people that were Different World fans going to see it because Wesley Snipes and Kadeem Hardison was in it. So like I said, that just adds a little bit more to what made this movie, and have the impact that it had. But so some of the behind the scenes stuff. So the fact that they had former Piston center Bob Lehner come in and pretty much like work as the basketball coach, and he got into a thing with Woody Harrelson, of where Woody basically was bragging about, like, oh yeah, I'm a great player and everything, and Bob was like, oh yeah, well, let's go out here on this court and let's see what you got. And basically Woody got embarrassed or whatever. But at the same time, I mean, Woody is not the tallest man in the world, and Bob is a damn NBA center. So clearly he was not going to outperform or outwork an actual NBA player, which in recent years people have been finding out. Yeah, people that you might call trash in the league are still better than the best street ball players. And everything, because I don't know of any dudes from the streets that just going and beating on regular, like NBA, true skilled NBA players. Like, let's be honest about that. It doesn't matter how good you are, but they are always better, because if you were as good, if not better than them, then why aren't you in the league? So I'll just leave that at that. But so another thing about the movie too is that the basketball instructors basically said that Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes, they reached the skill level to be able to start for NCAA Division III team. Not 2, not 1, but 3. So yeah, it's like, so they were serviceable enough, at least. So now I don't know how true this actually is, but apparently this was like one of Stanley Kubrick's favorite movies, and I'm just curious to know, like, what made this one of his. I would love to know, like, if his daughter knows anything about this or anything, like what made this be one of his favorite movies. And just imagine Stanley Kubrick, 2001 Space Odyssey, Doctor Strangelove, Full Metal Jacket, all these type of movies, Eyes Wide Shut, The Shining. That's Stanley Kubrick sitting and watching White Man Can't Jump and just say, oh, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I would love to know the full backstory to that. So also, I mean, the fact that you do have an actual former NBA player that's in the movie, Marcus Johnson, who plays Raymond in, of course, one of my favorite scenes of this movie, when Billy and Sydney are pretty much, doing their hustle, and because they're going from different courts to court, so they can't do it on the same court, so they end up going, to another spot, pretty much. And Raymond, who's like the damn basketball bully, so just like the person who talks a lot of trash, I think we all know somebody who's like a damn bully or whatever that's on the court. Now, whether they good or not, that's to be determined, but you know somebody that's on the court that's like a damn bully and everything. And when they go to pull the whole scam on Raymond, the fact that Raymond, he doesn't have enough money to even make the bet. So what does he decide to do? He's like, oh, I'm gonna go to my car real quick. He goes to the car, get a gun and a ski mask, tries to go around the corner to rob the damn liquor store, and ends up getting his gun taken from him by comedian Ronaldo Ray, and pretty much selling it for $250 to get half of, at least try to cover his end of the bet, which I thought was hilarious, that they literally took the focus off of what was going on in the court just to do that with him. And the fact that Marcus Johnson, I mean, he's actually hilarious in this movie, and especially when he goes back and then, like, say, when they doing the hustle and everything, and then he's kind of like, wait a minute, like, man, I done pull some scams, I done pull some nonsense on these courts before, but I ain't use no goofy white dude to do this. And he pulls out a damn razor like he ready to cut him, and because he can't fully know who's lying and who's telling the truth, so he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go to my car, get my other gun, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna shoot everybody's ass. And everybody basically cleared, and which is, like I say, that is hilarious. And I've known some people who pretty much have said the same thing, like they getting beat on the court or whatever, and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to my car and get my gun, and basically, and it's like, it should not have to get that serious. I mean, yes, there was money involved, but at the same time, it should never get that serious to where somebody's like, oh, I'm going to my car to get my gun because I done lost and everything like that. So I just think it's funny, like, with him in the movie, and the fact that he was a real NBA player, man, because I didn't I didn't learn that he was an actual NBA player until like maybe probably about 10 years ago. For some reason, something came up about white men can't jump, and it came up that, yeah, Marcus Johnson, who plays Raymond in the movie, was a real NBA player. Because by the time White Men Can't Jump was filmed, he was already retired and everything. So yeah, I didn't know he was an actual NBA player or whatever. But some of the people that could have been in this movie, and this movie probably would have been completely different. The first name is the fact that they wanted Charlie Sheen. He was actually the first choice for the role of Billy Hoyle. And keep in mind, this is around the time when Charlie Sheen was kind of, I want to say, making his rounds as far as hanging with the brothers, because in 1990 he did the movie Cadence with Lawrence Fishburne, where he's in a army prison basically, and it's just him as the sole white guy with this unit of black soldiers, and his dad Martin Sheen plays the no good that's kind of over this place and everything like that. And the fact that it would have been pair him back up with his Major League co-star Wesley Snipes. So, but he turned it down, saying he didn't feel it would have been fun because he just don't connect to the game of basketball like that. Which, I mean, you gotta admit, I mean, admire the fact that he was honest, right out the gate, like, nah, that ain't for me. Like, I play baseball or whatever, but basketball just ain't my sport. So, no, I'm gonna have to pass on that. But just imagine if he would have been like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. How different this movie might have been with Charlie Sheen as Billy Hoyle. Let's see, another potential person that could have been Billy Hoyle was Keanu Reeves. Now, a year before this, he is in Point Break and everything, and he's like slowly making his name, transitioning from being Bill and Ted Keanu Reeves to more serious action guy Keanu Reeves. But it would have been something if he would have been able to do this, but the fact that the way Ron Shelton describes Keanu Reeves is that, he was a hard worker, but he just wasn't a basketball player. So yeah, I could only imagine what he looked like on the basketball court, because I know what that means as far as, he's a hard worker. So he's gonna hustle, he's gonna do everything he possibly can to the max of his level, but whatever that max was, it still was not good enough for what they needed in the movie. But could you imagine if he had did White Men Can't Jump? Like, that would have been interesting to see. Trying to see, is there anybody else here? Another person that was considered for the Billy Hoyle role was David Duchovny, and it's like, I wonder how that would have went, because I mean, around that time, I mean, he had did Twin Peaks. The X-Files has not started just yet, because the X-Files actually starts in 93, I believe. But yeah, that would have been, I don't know how that would have went if David Duchovny played Billy Hoyle. Now, one of the surprises for me was who was also considered for the role of Sidney Dean, and the studio, apparently they wanted Denzel Washington for the role of Sidney Dean. Now, I mean, as far as the bravado and as far as the charisma, I think Denzel would have did a great job. Now, when it came to the actual basketball stuff, I think that's where things probably would have came into question, because if you ever seen the movie Ricochet, we do get to see him kind of playing ball in that movie, but it's nothing to the extent of, okay, how good is he really? Like, could he have been, something or whatever, as far as what they needed for the character? I mean, I guess we'd never know, but I think that would have been interesting. This would have been a completely different movie if you had, let's say, if you had Denzel Washington and Charlie Sheen, or if you had Denzel Washington and Keanu Reeves, or even David Duchovny. Or even if you had Denzel and Woody Harrelson, how would that have went? I wonder, and everything. But yeah, I just find some of these casting choices very interesting, or I should say potential casting choices very interesting, for what we ended up getting. And like I say, it was just a perfect match made in heaven between the fact of getting Woody and Wesley back together again, and just how they, like I say, it's just great how they pretty much, meshed well with each other. A few things about this movie that kind of stand out too. I mean, of course, the fact that the title is called White Men Can't Jump. So clearly right there, race is going to be involved, and race plays a factor throughout the course of the movie, because the whole scam is that Billy, this unassuming white dude who's really good at basketball. And it's like, when you really think about it, the fact that you had guys like Larry Bird, Mark Price, Chris Mullin, Rex Chapman, John Stockton, and I'm just naming a few, good white basketball players, right? The fact that the joke was, oh, he's a white boy, he can't play. And it's like, no, the white dudes can play ball. They play real organized ball. And I think that's kind of the difference between what black players, were really known for. Because, I mean, there is a contrast, even in the movie, the context of when you really watch how Sidney play and you watch how Billy play, clearly Sidney, he might have played high school ball, but I don't think he went any further than that. And he spent more time on the street courts. That's why he's like real flashy and all this type of stuff, and all that. Whereas Billy don't do anything that's like flashy. He knows how to play the game. So he'll use a pick. He'll use, things like that, a back door or something like that, and find and make the right pass to get a bucket and everything. So like I say, you could tell just by that, the contrasting of styles based on their race and how they played and everything. And I just find it funny too, like how, that's the whole thing. That's the joke of the white dude can't play. And it's like, in any setting, I mean, if you had a predominantly black basketball court and there's one white dude that's out there playing, I'm pretty damn sure he can play. So the whole assumption that, oh, he's a white guy that can't play, I think, of course, for the movie, it's kind of, it's like, all right, for the movie, it works. But I think in real life, I'm calling BS on that in a way. But I mean, it works for the movie. Another thing in this movie is that there is a whole thing about who can you truly trust? Because if it felt like Billy was just a little bit too trusting of Sidney, as they started scams going around the different courts and pretty much making a lot of money just doing the old, I'll pick the worst player out here. Oh, give him the white boy, and whole thing. And then the white boy goes out there and shows out, and they rack up on the money. But the fact that, and I will say this, the one thing I didn't like about the movie is that whole thing of Sidney uses Billy, to make all this money, but in the end, he pretty much double crosses him, and takes everything, even though he knows Billy's whole history. He knows what's going on with with him and Gloria and everything. And the fact that he does that, and it's like, Sidney kind of moving a little nasty in that regard, and it makes you kind of not like him to a degree. But it's like, oh, they're supposed to be all forgiven because they go on and they win that tournament later in the movie, even though because of the fact that Billy is a gambler and everything like that, he earns that money, but then he gambles it away and loses it to Sidney. But it's like, okay, does Sidney actually keep the money, or do he give it back to him? And because the way the movie ends, we don't ever get like any closure on that, really. And then also too, the fact that, you got these alpha dudes, because Sidney is an alpha, and to a degree, Billy is an alpha. I mean, except for when he's with Gloria. Gloria, of course, we know who's in charge when it comes down to him and Gloria. But, you have these two alpha dudes that's, running it up on the court and everything. And I think the scene that kind of really showcases like them as like alpha males in a way is that 3-point shootout contest that we get at the beginning. And the fact that I think that's what kind of always stuck with Sidney, is the fact that Billy outsmarted him with that whole 3-point shootout, especially when he tells him, it's like, I've hustled a hell of a lot better players than you and everything. It's like, you need to think about, you see the white dude, that looks like I do. It's like, why do you think that is? And then it's like Sidney don't realize until it's way too late. And I think that kind of sticks with him throughout the rest of the movie. But why? But after he like become cool with this dude, why would you double cross him, like that? Which, like I said, I've always had an issue with that. I mean, does it really take away from the movie? No, but just me personally, I've kind of always had issue with that. And then too, the movie shows like it's the art of the hustle, and which again is something different that you didn't really see in movies. I mean, like movies like this. I mean, granted, you've had movies about hustlers. Hell, I mean, Paul Newman famously, The Hustler or The Color of Money, right? About hustlers, but that was a different type of hustle because they was pool hall junkies basically, and it was hustling in pool halls and stuff like that. But it was a little different seeing this type of hustle and just how, again, it all intertwined with, with their lives and everything. Because for some of these dudes, hell, they was putting up, probably half of their check, or hell, even their rent money or whatever. Or in one case, dude actually took the chain from his girl and put it up as collateral as far as waging the bet. And it's like, what are y'all doing? Like, that's insanity and everything. But the movie does a very good job of just showing like what somebody will put on the line, just to try to make a little bit of money, right? I did mention, of course, about the whole subplot with Gloria, wanting to be on Jeopardy, and that kind of adds a little something a little different, and kind of adds a little bit more to the comedy of it all. And the fact that, Gloria is, I would say she's the third lead, even though Tara Farrell she's in it, but she's not really in it the way Gloria is. It would have been nice to get more of her because, like I said earlier, she is a very good actress, and everything. But Gloria gets her own, her moments to shine. And like I say, in the end, her, finally, basically giving Billy that kiss and saying goodbye and just skating off from him. And it's like, yeah, like you got to get over yourself, dude. And you just lost a really good woman, and everything. But, one of the things about the movie too that I enjoy is, and it's kind of almost like a throwaway scene to a degree, and it's when they're driving in the car and the whole Jimi Hendrix conversation comes up, and the whole thing about like, wait a minute, like you listen to Jimi Hendrix, like Jimi Hendrix was black, it's like, and everything. But then when they make the, like, man, you look at, like, Jimmy was the only black dude in the band, like, what are y'all doing? So, but the whole thing is like, you can listen to Jimmy, but you can't hear Jimmy and everything, which I think that was saying a lot. There was a little bit more of a deeper meaning to that, and I think that adds a little bit to why Sidney did what he did towards the end. It's like, yeah, you listening to what I'm saying, but you're not hearing what I'm saying and everything. So I did too. I mean, this movie is, I mean, it is shot very well. The basketball scenes are probably some of the best shot basketball scenes because you get to see them actually playing ball, and everything. And then of course them being on Venice Beach, so you do get the backdrop of like the sand and the beach and, you know, the ocean and all that stuff, and, you know, the people in the background, the girls on the rollerblades and things like that. I mean, it's just a cool atmosphere, and it almost feels like a lived in universe, which, I mean, they were filming on the real Venice Beach, so of course it's real, but at the same time, when you're watching it, you kind of feel like you're on, you know, you're there watching what's happening, opposed to you in the, you know, as a audience member just watching on the screen or whatever, if that make any sense. So I will pretty much say this, that the fact that we did get a reboot in 2023, which I've never watched, have no intentions to ever watch it. Mainly because I don't think, for one, when you look back in hindsight, I mean, did people really know that Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson were going to have this great, insane chemistry together, henceforth why they went on to do Money Train together? And I still believe that they should do one more movie together, just to, just for old time's sakes, and everything. But did people really think that they were going to have the insane chemistry they had? Because one thing that you can't fake chemistry with your co-star, and it has to work. Now, I did see the trailer, and I have seen certain clips from the 2023 movie, and the fact that they had, they had the games like inside and stuff like that right there, it kind of took away from the whole Streetball aspect of it. Now, are they probably playing games outside? Probably so. But the fact that you took anything inside, I think just kind of lessens what made White Men Can't Jump, a Streetball, level, cultural type thing. Because, Streetball is meant to play outside. And going back to And One for a second, because I was a huge And One fan when I was a teenager and stuff like that. But I do feel like when they started getting a little too big and had a little bit too much dip on the chip, and instead of staying outside on the streetball courts, they took it inside to the arenas, and it's like it was too produced and too commercial or whatever. It lost its edge, in my opinion, because you still trying to portray something as a cultural thing, as being for the street basically, but you playing inside in the gymnasium. And it's like, well, I could just go and watch high school ball, I could watch college ball, or I could watch the NBA or the WNBA if I want to see people playing in the gym. I'm watching you guys because y'all have something that's a little bit more raw and rugged in a way and everything. So to say that, in comparison to the 2023 version, I feel like that's what it was. And the fact that they cast Jack Harlow to be the Billy Hoyle character, basically, and it's like, nothing against Jack Harlow. I don't really listen to his music. He has a few songs that I find all right, but I find the same thing. I'm the same way about a few other artists that I really don't like. There's at least one song by even artists I don't like that I do actually like that they have or whatever. But you trying to tell me that Jack Harlow was the best choice, and I forget the guy name who is the Sidney Deans, like those were the best choices that they had. Did they do with the 2023 version as far as casting that they did with the original version, by making sure no, I want these guys to be able to look like they can actually play ball, and everything. Like I said, I can't fully judge it because I haven't seen it, and I really have no desire to watch it. Or maybe I should watch it just so I can be able to actually give a full comparison of the two movies. So you know what, I think I will, because one thing I'm getting better at is giving things a watch at least one time, just so I can be able to actually fully talk about it in a way of where I'm not just dismissive of it and everything. No, so yeah, in that regard, I think I will check it out, and then probably next episode I'll come back and say, I'll probably get my thoughts at the beginning of the next episode, just to compare the two movies. So yeah, I think I will actually watch it just so I can give a full scope of both movies and how they probably relate, and find things about both movies and everything like that. Yeah. So before I get up out of here, I will ask this question: is this movie still relevant today? And I think it is. I think it's still a fun movie. You don't get movies made particularly like this anymore. And like I said it before, and I say it again, that I felt like Ron Shelton did a great job of going outside the box and making it a Streetball movie, and everything. And like I say, just great performances all throughout. I mean, Woody Harrelson, Wesley Snipes, Gloria, Rosie Perez is Gloria. Like I say, even Kadeem Hardison. Are we going to Sizzler? We going to Sizzler. Marcus Johnson as Raymond, ready to, shoot up the doggone court. Hell, even Ronaldo Ray, who's only in it for like maybe 3 minutes. Raymond, take that goddamn mask off. And everything like that. It's just some really dope performances throughout the movie, and it's just a fun overall movie, I think. And it's something that's kind of missed. We don't get fun movies like this so much, and everything. Now, where exactly would I probably rank this movie as far as like sports comedies? I mean, it'd probably be in my top. I don't know if it's necessarily my top 5, but I want to say my top 10 at least. That's where I probably would put this, and everything, because it is a favorite of mine. Like I say, I've been watching it ever since I was a kid and everything, and watching it as a kid and then watching it as an adult, you kind of understand things a little differently, of course, which, I mean, that's a natural thing, right? How you look at things, because I mean, as a kid, I was only watching it from the basketball standpoint and all the trash talk, but then as an adult, you kind of paying more attention to, well, Sidney has a house, a family, he got a business he trying to do and everything like this. Billy is pretty much just, hustling, he's a hustler through and through, and him and Gloria pretty much, ducking and dodging, living in motels, looking over their back, because they owe money and stuff like that. So like I say, you look at it completely different as you get older. I have talked about a few of my personal favorite scenes and actually have said some of my quotes. So I will say again, that opening basketball scene with Sidney and Billy, where they doing the 3-point shootout. I think it is one of the best, because it's just a lot of trash talking going on in that scene, which I feel like that some of that they were kind of just going off script and just riffing and everything. The whole scamming thing with Raymond is probably, that might actually be my favorite part of the movie, just because like I said, the fact that like I ain't never used no goofy white mother, to hustle nobody with, and just going back and forth. And then like I say, the fact that he didn't have the money initially, so let me go over here to this corner store real quick to try to rob it, and then end up getting the gun took, even though he get $250 for it, but end up getting the gun took. And then he go back and all the craziness that happened from that. Now, because we are somewhat in an era where we are getting like franchise revivals and sequels and stuff like that. Now, instead of them doing a remake, reboot, whatever the 2023 version is, whatever you want to call it, I wonder how people would have felt if they did like a outright sequel to it, and you had maybe, Billy probably had a kid with somebody somewhere and everything like that, and you could, have an appearance by Wesley and Woody or whatever, or in the reboot. And granted, like I said, I haven't seen it, so I doubt this even happened, because I think this would have been talked about if it did. That just like how the two legendary Streetball players are talked about throughout the original film, and then Billy and Sidney, they play against those guys at the end. What if, in a way, Billy and Sidney are mentioned as, the playground legends, and then they would have made an appearance at the end to play against the newer generation. But as far as a sequel, I mean, everything doesn't always need a sequel, and I'm kind of glad they didn't make a sequel. But that's just, if you talk about a sequel, it's good to sometimes it's good to theorize and kind of come up with your own, but at the same time, for the most part, no, sequels are not always necessary to movies. Okay, you don't always need a sequel to everything. It's good to talk about it sometimes, but as far as a final, execution of it, you don't really always have to do it. So that's pretty much for this episode. Hopefully you guys are checking out these movies. White Man Can't Jump. You can watch it on Hulu. If you haven't seen, if you just want to revisit or whatever, it is on Hulu. Both versions are actually on Hulu. So I'll say definitely check out White Man Can't Jump. And the 2023 reboot if you choose to as well. Next episode I will be wrapping up the month with 2011's Warrior, starring Joel Edgerton, Tom Hardy, and Nick Nolte. That is a movie that's kind of been on my radar to do for a while now, so what better time to do it than for a sports movie month. I will ask the question to you guys, the listeners, what is your favorite moment from White Man Can't Jump? You can definitely leave your comments on this episode, wherever you listen to your podcast. If you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, also over on YouTube, because the YouTube channel is up. That is where I have been posting all the newer episodes, recent and everything like that. So definitely, if you're listening on YouTube, you can comment down below what your favorite moment from White Man Can't Jump is, and also be sure to subscribe, share, follow, let your friends, families, whoever know J Movie Talk over on YouTube. Like I say, follow us on YouTube, and everything like that. That is pretty much it for me. I want to thank you guys for listening. I will be back to wrap up Sports Movie Month with episode 342, as I'll be talking 2011's Warrior. Until next time, peace.